Hey Ramblers, before we kick off today's episode, I just want you to know that we're finally ready to launch OffSource and it's going to be in October. The team is working tirelessly and endlessly to bring you an amazing product and service. So if you know anyone that needs a virtual assistant or just like to make some extra money for our referral program, tell them to head to offsource.tech or text info to 516-408-2427. Make sure you're following us across all social media at OffSourceHQ. Now let's get ready to ramble. Before we begin, a moment from our sponsor.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of The Ramblings. I'm your host, Angelo Roberts, and we finally have Benjamin joining us back again. We've done some episodes without him. He's been pretty busy working on some things, doing a lot of building, like actual building at that, you know? So what's been going on, man? We haven't seen you, heard from you or anything. Tell us what's new.
Hey man, it's really good to be back again. I'm really excited. We've just, we have an employee now, and that's, you obviously know this, but the audience maybe doesn't. So a lot of what I do in the business is the human elements as far as like who we hire, managing, interviewing, setting that kind of thing up. And also another element that was introduced recently by one of our hopeful future referral partners is the concept of an experience officer, in terms of like the experience of the people who work there and the people who like are affiliated with you and working with you, and making sure that everybody feels great about working for or working with the company. So that's really a lot of the things that I've been focusing and giving a lot of attention on lately.
I like that. And that's that part's new to me. I mean, because we keep it tight knit, who's the future referral partner? Is it someone that we've worked with? Like, we don't want to give up too many hints because I'm doing like a launch for the list of people, like an official list of names.
Right.
However,
and it's not somebody we've even asked. I was throwing it out there just as a statement. Yeah.
So it's a surprise to me too?
No, it's just something that's aspirational and we haven't accomplished yet. So it's just not something we would talk about with someone's name on it. It's just like, oh, we would like to have this person as a referral partner at this point.
Oh, okay, bet. I'm all down for that. I'm all down for that. Absolutely, 100%. So today we actually wanted to get into like a small, like kind of almost a specific topic, because before we got on, we were thinking about different things to kind of talk about, and being in the nature of our social mission, which is really trying to create a micro eco. By the way, I've broken down like the social mission to like an exact science of words. And how I say it is we are trying to build, or what we're building is a micro ecosystem for the Bauer community. And what the Bauer community stands for is Black and underrepresented. So Bauer community, Black and underrepresented community, and building a micro ecosystem for the people in that community to thrive in terms of education, financial literacy, jobs, actual financial, predicament and procedures. And so with that social mission comes instinctively or naturally, or even just like by second nature, philanthropy, when you're trying to do things in a different manner and it's going to take money and time investment and everything. I think we can kind of put that in the philanthropy category, maybe. However, I'm learning some new things. So Ben here is talking about how clearly, I guess we're not going to use the word all, but a strong majority of philanthropy is evil, not right, and so I guess some of the best ways is, what's the difference between, like, say, good philanthropy and bad philanthropy? I guess let's start with that. What is philanthropy, and then like what's good philanthropy and what's bad philanthropy?
I think that exact question is the perfect premise to start from. Just the concept that there is good and bad philanthropy. Because right now, the way our culture and the way these things are reported, it's just, oh my God, this person donated this money. It's amazing. It's great. Like, it's going to help all these people. And the only angle that we ever report on is good philanthropy. But we don't ever look into the other externalities and consequences of what somebody donating money, putting their name on a building, and then when they call those people later about whatever it is that they may want to call them about, those people pick up that phone call and they're going to have a much different attitude towards somebody who just donated money and has their name on a building versus somebody who just picks up their phone with a concern. So it's kind of similar to how, in the same way that lobbying affects government, it's everything else, because the way that business and life and, the intersection of business and government's work is that when you do people favors, they do you favors back. And what are the interests of somebody who's donating a bunch of money? The interests of somebody who has a lot of money.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So it's more or less the influence factor, the who, like almost like how we were talking about when we were first becoming a corporation and looking at, people to invest in us. We don't want to be careful in who we take money from because of the amount of control or influence that person has.
Absolutely. And so I think the specific ways in which, philanthropy is just a thing you can do. You can accomplish whatever you want with your philanthropy. It's just a matter of what it is that you are choosing to accomplish with that philanthropy. And in America right now, we have something that some people call, like the nonprofit industrial complex, which is essentially just a means through which a lot of money is, quote unquote, donated to these nonprofits. It's a lot of philanthropy, a lot of money being given away. The Red Cross is a great example, where they take in millions and millions and millions of dollars every single year, all the time, regularly. Huge chunks of it go unaccounted. Large percentages of it aren't used in very efficient ways whatsoever. There are numerous times in which supplies that they allegedly purchased and were supposed to be delivered to people never get there, and like they just don't say anything about it and move on to the next thing. So it's not even like, in terms of the tangible sense of whether, like, the actual money that's getting donated in a philanthropic way is impacting people positively. That's one aspect of it. But then the other aspect of it is something called social laundering.
Like money laundering, but in the terms of social aspect.
Reputation laundering.
Okay. So I can kind of decipher what that would mean. So for the people that wouldn't necessarily understand, go deeper into social laundering.
So essentially, Bill Gates is the poster child of, like social reputation laundering. So, Bill Gates, the Bill Gates of the 80s and 90s is known as, cutthroat business person who essentially monopolized the personal computer industry for as long as he was able to before, eventually just Macs just became so popular, and just the operating system, everything was so much better. It just developed a lot more density. But for a while, through some really aggressive, is how they usually describe it, business practices and monopolization and those kinds of tactics, and putting pressure on smaller people, buying their things for less than what it's worth, that kind of stuff.
Would you consider the strategy of monopolizing something negative?
Yes.
In a way that's not necessarily monopolizing, but taking or achieving large market share?
I mean, market capture is inherently inefficient.
In the sense of what?
Economically. It's just if there's 5 companies, if those 5 companies compete on price, quality. If there's one company, they don't do any of that. So just from a pure, just basic economics perspective, like that's the reason why we have antitrust laws, because one company just having a complete monopoly over an industry, we've experienced it now.
Okay, not in the sense of like
feudalism and stuff,
not in the sense of like an absolute complete monopoly, but in the sense of a legal monopoly, if you will. So as you were explaining,
what would be the difference?
Microsoft back in the day, during those times, while he dominated a much of the shares and had, we can call what's the word we just said, particular practices that represented monopolization, it wasn't an actual singular monopoly. There were other companies, they just didn't have the market share that Microsoft had.
Right. So Walmart's not technically a monopoly. But if Walmart moves into a town that has a grocery store, a drugstore, like a cheap clothing store, like maybe like a TJ Maxx, or maybe there's something even lower that like just sells like cheap non-name brand clothing, and a butcher, what else? Like a bakery. Like Walmart's not a monopoly, but those five businesses, if a Walmart moves into their neighborhood, are probably not going to survive. So like something being a technical monopoly, it doesn't have to be a literal monopoly for a business to be exercising monopolistic tendencies and pressures upon the market,
But at
such
that
that
sense,
Amazon's not a
okay.
literal monopoly, but because they own the platform and they're using the data from the platform to undercut their competitors on price, like it's not, they're allowing the people to sell it on their platform. It's not a literal monopoly, but if you own the platform, so you make your thing cost 5% less than mine, no matter what, that's a monopoly. You get me?
I get what you're saying, but how in the sense of when doing business, say that was your initial way to get started. Hey, this is how I'm going to break into the industry, and now your company goes from zero to a lot. How do you man? Do you consider it the responsibility of a founder to guarantee that their company doesn't reach a specific point that they're able to do that?
I mean, it's not able, it's a choice. Like you don't have to deliberately squeeze your competitors out of the market by doing things you know they can't do. Like that's a thing. You could do that, or you could choose to not do that. Like Amazon doesn't have to use the data that they receive by owning the platform to price their items at a slight like discount from their competitors. Like they could just not do that.
Right, but why would you not do that? You feel me? There's nothing unethical in doing that.
I mean, I don't know. I guess to me, it's not really a matter of ethics, and like
Because that's a free
it's
market situation. I would believe people saying, "Hey, we have our ability to compete is just being cheaper. Okay, well, we're not going to be cheaper. We're going to be more effective or last longer. So it's technically cheaper. You know, it allows for other people to pop up.
but other people could repeat those strategies. The only reason they can't repeat those strategies is if you do specific things using your institutional power in the market to prevent other people from being able to compete. For example, like the way that airlines negotiate gate contracts to where like they have these long-standing relationships and these extremely expensive long-term deals such that they make the barrier to entry for a new airline to get a spot at the same place extremely high, and it's much less likely that that's going to happen.
Okay, and what would be, I guess, the alleviate? What would you, in your answer, be for the alleviation of that particular issue? Because it's not like it can be only airlines. We could say that for like people in retail, as we talked about with Walmart, people in e-commerce with Amazon, even with the large number of people, women doing beauty and things like that. With the Asian markets, and how the Chinese stores are run. What would be, I guess, the balance? What would bring balance?
Oh, I mean, a government. Like companies historically have never, ever, at any point in time, self-regulated themselves in any kind of responsible way. So like it would just be preposterous to ever expect that, because what a corporation is designed to do is to maximize shareholder value, make as much money as possible, and pay as little as possible, give out as little as possible in settlements or payments for externalities or things of that nature. So like it's a specific purpose. Where we've gone wrong is trying to pretend that something that's an element of our economy should be an element of our politics and our life. Like a corporation should not have, like, the concept of like making things good for corporations should not be a thought that we have to consider as equal or more important than whether or not things can be good, should be good for the people that live in the country. But right now, we have a government and politicians that only care about the health and the well-being of corporations and don't care at all about the health and well-being of people.
Interesting. So going back to the good and bad of philanthropy, extrapolate a little bit on how this, I guess, imbalance causes there to be a bad or good version of philanthropy. How does that dictate how philanthropy works?
Right. So a great example where we started from this was talking about Bill Gates. And so Bill Gates's effect on, the economy and things of that nature, like, are in a lot of ways positive. Like, the computer was a very big innovation. It's done a lot. It's made people like more productive. It's done a lot of things, but at the same time, it drastically accelerated the concentration of wealth into the hands of an increasingly smaller number of people, like almost at the top of that list, literally being Bill Gates. So you can't separate the effects that of like not just the technology that was created, but why it was created, for whom, by whom, and to benefit whom. And when you see that the effects of the modernization and computerization of our economy is that more and more and more of the money went to the richer people, and they were able to surgically like slice money out of pensions, out of like budgets for states and local governments, out of unions and things, through right to work laws that made it illegal to have like union dues be automatically coming out of people's paychecks. Like, all of these systematic things that were done on purpose, all of them are part of like this ecosystem that continues the fact that like government and things like that are about corporations and not about the people that it's supposed to serve.
But wouldn't excuse in this being I guess my particular mindset, but isn't that like inevitable in the success of anything that's large? If you like, you set out like in this example of Bill Gates, the PC at first, computers were something that were like large things in a room that only business people could have, like actual businesses, not even like business people, but like businesses themselves could afford. And then the PC comes along, making it accessible for down to the middle class common person. It's still, a more expensive piece of device for people on the lower end, but still down to the lower end of the middle class spectrum, which is a pretty large jump, being from strictly corporate all the way down. So the popularity of that is the reason that initially gives you the boom. So how would you draw the line between a business that is just inevitably being successful because it's good, and bad business owner practices?
Well, the reason the line is hard to draw is because in America, we live in a corrupt banana republic. So like, once a business reaches a certain amount of money and market share, by definition, they have then acquired, in a lot of cases, the political influence required to wield power over the other people, like in the market that they're competing in. So it's like, it's not really a matter of like business being good or bad. It's just a matter of, right now, the people that you're competing with in a market also have the ability to bribe politicians, and they also have the ability, to like try to get sneaky tax breaks, for example, that other people can't get access to. And that's something that, small businesses have a lot of trouble getting access to capital. And we saw it just in this government policy with the PPP loans, where like people with small businesses, specifically Black people with small businesses, weren't able to get a dime, versus like large companies like the airlines that were given $100 billion in stock buybacks doing $150 billion in stock buybacks in the last couple of years. They submitted like a 3-line form to the government and just got access to $1 trillion line of credit that's just printed whenever they want. So it's like, the structural aspects of how business is done in America are so corrupt to the degree that good business is synonymous with corruption.
What do you mean by how good business is synonymous with? What do you mean by good business? Like your business practices. By doing good business, you mean like just being successful? What do you mean by doing good business?
The things you have to do to succeed relative to the other people in the market incentivize lawless and
I do
anarchist type behavior.
I do agree that it is incentivized. However, I don't think it's a mandatory kind of thing. I do feel like, there are a good number of companies out there that are pretty good in terms of example.
Well, what happens if you're not making your quarterly returns that the shareholders decide you need to be making?
Well, I mean, not every company is also public either.
Right, but I mean, we're talking about the largest firms, like most of those are public firms, right? Where most people work, and like where the huge sector of like the economy that is Wall Street, that's all public firms, right?
I'd agree, yeah.
So, like most of the economy is in public firms, isn't it?
Uh, Most, I'm not sure. Close to most, maybe. Acts the demographic in which we work with, small businesses account for 80% of the businesses, and I believe it's like
But that's just number. That's not value.
close to the 50 something percent mark in terms of like employers, like private sector and everything like that. In terms of private sector, small businesses, not large corporations, account for, it's like a high 40 or low 50 number, but in terms of basically like paying people. So when you look at this market sectors, small businesses with under 500 employees, with under 500 employees, are pretty
And
big
those are
chunk of
usually
that.
private.
All private, yes. Not even
Yeah.
usually, because if you're public, I mean, unless you're like a very, very good tech company, like I'd say like Instagram, which I don't even think was public when they were sold to Facebook. It was only like 13 people on the team when they were sold for like $1 billion.
Really?
Yeah, there was 13 people at Instagram when they were sold for $1 billion to Facebook.
That's insane.
But I don't know if
Wasn't
they
that
were
just a couple years ago?
a couple years, is like 5 years, maybe like 2015, maybe like.
Oh, really? That long? I swear it was only like 2017, 2018 that I remembered starting to see it, that it was like powered by Facebook.
Oh, that's when they started doing the branding over it.
Ah, but they purchased it before that.
Oh, 2012.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
when they purchased it?
Yep.
They just kept quiet about it for a while then.
No, it was huge, bro. I remember being, because I took whatchamacallit, like business classes in high school.
Ah.
It was like a thing. Like I remember what's crazy? What is Apple's share price right now? Apple share. I'm gonna Google Apple share price. Apple is okay. So they're $112. But what have they been over the last year? Okay, they've been pretty high. So I remember being in high school, literally waiting that week for Apple for the first time to surpass like $100 or something a share.
That's crazy.
Like
that would have been a good $100 to spend.
Right. Like just looking at them to go over, and then like just thinking about that time frame. Like that's crazy of how long, like how little time is, but how long it is. Like 2012 is 8 years ago.
It feels like forever though.
Forever.
It's because we're so young mostly.
Yeah, because 8 years ago we were so in a different space in our life.
Yeah, how old was I? 16. So that, high school. Wow, that's crazy that I was in high school 8 years ago though.
Right. Like it, but when you say 8 years, you think like, you feel like, maybe it wasn't that long ago. Like, but it feels long ago when you start thinking about it.
It was mad long ago for me personally.
Yeah. Like, I think it's because also so much happens in that amount of time. Like once you start getting older, less things happen. Like there's less change.
Hopefully not for me. That's not the arc I'm aiming for.
Mm.
I think complacency and not learning and growing anymore are large parts of the reasons why I'm not going to say what I was initially thinking. Why sometimes some of our older friends can be interesting to engage with.
Mm. That is very true. I was literally just thinking, like, what if, because I look at time frames a lot. And DoorDash was started in 2010 and it's 2020. And I always think, what is the next 10 years? What is the next 10? That's why I like to build things, because I'm like, I can build something and have a result. Like I can look back and say, oh, hey, I did this.
It definitely is cool to have something like tangible. Just in general, just as humans, things are so impermanent and so weird. Anytime you can do something that seems and feels permanent, it feels very good.
Right. Even though I know it's not going to be permanent, it feels good to know that, hey, there's going to be something here after I die that I left.
Yeah, that's important to humans because death freaks us out.
You know what's crazy? And I don't know if it's because of my religious beliefs, but death doesn't freak me out in that way. The process of how I'm gonna die freaks me out. That really scares me. Like the knowing I'm gonna die part doesn't necessarily scare me, but like the how I'm gonna die part scares me.
Well, pretty much the point of why religion was created was to provide security to people about what would happen after they die. So it would make sense that religious beliefs make you more comfortable with just having certainty about, being sure about what's going to happen when you die.
Well, I mean, I don't believe in it. Well, uniquely, I don't believe anything happens when I die. Like I don't believe in heaven. I mean, I believe in heaven, but not in the sense where people die and go to heaven. You feel me? That's
I just mean in the sense that you are secure in what you believe is going to happen when you die, which to you is nothing. But just that you have decided, you have a stance on that, and you just know what it is, and that's
oh,
just what you're rocking
okay.
with.
Yeah, I mean, I outside of the general populace of people that have a religious belief, would you consider yourself would you consider yourself someone with a religious belief?
No.
Okay. Do you feel like nothing happens when you die? You just die.
I honestly do not purport to have any ideas about such things.
No, not a purport, like feel not like purport an idea, but like what are your like I don't like you can say I don't believe anything happens after death. You feel me?
No, I genuinely don't know. It could be either to me, and I would not be surprised.
Okay. That's very understandable.
Yeah, I don't claim to have any information, My basic opinion is that I'm spiritual, but I feel like it's unlikely that were there ever to be some perfect religion that humans were able to preserve it or not ruin it or something like that. So like to me it's just that religion just seems preposterous to me, not the concept of spirituality or even the concept of a god. It's just that some people would have it perfectly right and everyone else is just completely wrong despite them all being similar and kind of connected. Just seems weird to me.
Very understandable. Very understandable. I think that actually allows us to kind of wrap up and circle back to the good and the bad of the influence of what's the word?
Philanthropy.
Philanthropy. There we
And
go.
I think what we hit on earlier was just a really good thing, just about what are the interests of somebody who's extremely wealthy, and generally speaking, are those the same as like people who are not wealthy?
Well, I don't think the interests are necessarily the same always.
Right. So in the sense of like, if rich people have more government influence about the things that they care about and the things that they would like to see, like, do we would think that that would more often be good for people that have less money than them or bad for people that have less money than them?
Well, I think it's because the way the system is worked, it's so that people with money are against people without money when it should be that they come together.
Who do you think is preventing it from coming together?
So the people with money.
Why do you think they're preventing it from coming together?
Because it would probably mean less money, and in their eyes it means less money, when in reality it actually means more money. But I'm not. We'll say that for a different podcast.
No, I actually that's honestly my economic philosophy as far as how we should treat the economy as well, and it's borne out by a lot of data. Like that, people being able to purchase things is what makes the economy good. So the more money that individual people have, rather than like rich people hold in accounts, the more money is actually being spent and stimulating the economy. So like it's not even just a matter of opinion. It's like mostly a matter of fact that like if we taxed rich people more and put it in the hands of normal people, they would just spend it right back to those rich people anyway, and those rich people would be even richer and people would be better off.
Okay, as long as we add that last part, I like. Okay, full circle. I like it. Then you
Right. So
almost. I'm not gonna lie, almost lost me.
that's the insanity of capitalism, is that like at the extreme late stage of capitalism that we are in right now, it's literally eating itself, such to the point that even like the things that they do to try to preserve capital aren't good for capital. I mean, look at what's happening in the stock market as a result of like the financial crisis of '08, the financial crisis of 2020. Like that's just in these last years, despite us having a completely pro Wall Street policy that screws over everybody else. And Wall Street still is like only kind of limping ahead of the pace of where it should be.
I agree. That's where I think we'll actually touch on that. I think we'll make that just a 2-part episode so that we can touch on, like we talked about philanthropy, negative, positives, but also business practices, negative, positive.
Yeah. And if we're going to just one more note just on philanthropy, I think, one of the cases that we first ended up talking about, I think, remember when that guy donated all the money to one of the HBCUs for
Right.
the young men to graduate and not have loans.
Right.
And how like it was also like it didn't come out at the time, but obviously he knew this at the time. He was under investigation for like tax fraud and for like things in relating to his work as a hedge fund manager and like, or not hedge fund, his private equity. So him knowing that he's going on trial and him knowing that like, whether it's going to be jury, judge, blah, 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 they're going to look at his philanthropic records. What do you think was the reason why he donated that money while he knew he was under investigation, but other people didn't?
Goes back to the social influence factor.
Exactly that. And it goes back to how like I don't have as much information specifically about Bill Gates, but I do know that like in addition, I don't know if he was necessarily in any legal trouble, but as far as like just the reputation change from being known as cutthroat businessman to a person who sends people to college through like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, like that's just the textbook case of doing things that people don't necessarily like and then spending pennies on the dollar to try to, like make your reputation look better.
Like a personal rebranding thing. Okay, understandable. I think this has been enlightening and learning.
Yeah, and it doesn't make like philanthropy bad. Like the philanthropy is not bad just because people are doing bad things with it. to achieve ends that are for their own selfish reasons. It just means that when people do philanthropy, it's not automatically good. And you have to assess why they're doing it, where they got the money to be doing it, and whether or not this is actually going to help them make more money in the future than what it costs.
I think that's good. We'll talk to you Ramblers next week.
Before you go, Ramblers, if you enjoyed today's podcast, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and make sure you're following me across all platforms at Assistance HQ. Catch up on exclusive content and keep track of everything going on at OffSource. See you in October.